Happy Sunday, everybody. Today we are looking at the Kato P42s. Alrighty, so before jumping into the review, I just want to have a quick thing here. I am changing how I do my video structure and whatnot, and I'm using an iPad to do that now, and I've been noticing some poor audio quality, so I got a mic system that I'm using now, and hopefully it is sounding better. However, with every new piece of equipment you get, you find another problem. It seems that my tripod mount is just not strong enough to hold the iPad still, so ordered a better aluminum mount. Hopefully that will hold things better. So there's going to be a little bit of jiggle in this video. Unfortunately, that's just the way it's going to be until I can get that new mount. So sorry about that, but it's just part of progression. So as we dive into this, there are two distinct, at the very least, phases of these units. The 161 is a substantially newer release loco, and the 77 behind it there in the face, I want to say it's phase 3 paint. It's a much older locomotive, and there's going to be some differences in the way they run. So when we get into that, just know that not all of these are created equal. So you're going to possibly want to look into data manufacturer before you buy one of these, because there is substantial differences in the way that they run. So let's go ahead and zoom in, take a good look at these, and talk about some of the details that Kato really gets right on these. Alrighty, so we're up close and personal. And as we're up front here, notice that there are microtrans conversions done on these units. This is going to be a bit of a hot take, but these are one of the few engines that I recommend probably not doing a microtrans conversion on. The couplers that they come with from the factory are relatively short, and they look really scale on the units. Unfortunately, I did this quite a while ago thinking it would be an upgrade, and I actually find that it's actually more of a hindrance than an upgrade. If you're connecting to other brands of rolling stock, definitely helps. However, in all the circumstances I had with these two units running standard couplers, when they're connected to one another, they're really nice and close and look scale. They also don't have any derailing problems. They stay well connected to one another. And for the most part, I'm always just hooked up to Kato pieces of rolling stock. That is mainly what my passenger fleet is made of, is Kato rolling stock. So they interface perfectly with the Kato couplers that come on those pieces of rolling stock. Also, you're really not switching with these units, so uncoupling and coupling from loco or rolling stock is not a big deal. You're kind of hooked up in a unit train and you stay that way. So in this particular situation, I probably am not going to recommend doing a microtrans conversion. Just leave them stock. You'll be plenty happy with them in that configuration. When we actually look at the detail here, it is nice. Gray trucks are so good for seeing the detail. The trucks on these really are outstanding. They look great on the unit, and as you move up onto the body, some of the body detail, I wish the hand grabs were separately applied detail, but they do give you the illusion of real on here. The grill works really nice, and if you look at the bottom right above the front wheel there, the GE logo is stuck on the side, and that's really cool. It is super crisp and nice. It adds a lot of realism to it. Before we slide down here, just take a moment to look at the Amtrak logo on the side there and how sharp it is. There's no pixelation or anything like that. They really got that nice on the side here. Just you can tell as you move down here, the paint kind of tends to not have a crisp line. Right back over here above the 161, they were able to get a nice sharp logo. A lot of times on some of these logos, you'll see like right through there, you can tell that the paint line isn't super crisp. So I would like to see that level of detail throughout the rest of the paint scheme on this particular one, and it's just not there. That's unfortunate. As we are sliding down here, air tanks on the bottom. I'm not sure what those are. Almost look like toolboxes. And again, really good image of the truck there. They really do stand out on this model. Grill works really good, and the clear windows don't have any light bleed, so that is awesome. I appreciate that. I'm going to pause here, and we're going to switch over to the 77. This one is the drug that got me into these locos in the first place. I love this paint scheme. There's just something about it. It just looks really good to my eye. The silver's right on, and it really brings out all the details, especially, again, look at the trucks on these and how nice they look. The paint and decal work is just exceptional on this model, and I wish it carried over into the newer ones. Horns up top are applied. Lots of decals up there. Really a gorgeous looking loco. I think Kato really killed it on these older units. And then on this you can also see the grill on the fan is really well put together. Let's go ahead and turn the camera just a little bit here. And we'll get a view of the front of the engine. You can see the windshield wipers on there. That's all really nicely put together. There are some separately applied details that you can put on there, kind of like at the nose there. There's a piece of clear plastic you can stick in there that like a light shield type thing. Working ditch lights on this. They're not separate, but they do function with the headlights, so that's a nice touch. And like I said, don't need to do the microtrains conversion on this. It actually looks really nice with the standard coupler installed. All right, so we need to talk about performance, runnability, that type of stuff with these units, because the P42s are kind of in their own realm. They're a little bit different than all the other locos you're probably going to see for the most part. The reason why is they are roughly the same length as a regular freight loco. So they have a full-length frame, however, two-wheel trucks like a GP. And these are proof positive that you can have a two-wheel locomotive and have it be super reliable. And something that needs to be stated before we talk about the near perfect performance of these is the decoder. Now, I mentioned this a little bit when I was doing my light video on these on Wednesday. One of the first videos on my channel was putting a decoder in 161 back there. And honestly, it's a pretty simple task to do as long as you remember that, one, you need to make sure there's either space on either side of the pickup so you're not grounding out your motor leads, or use capped-on tape. I ran these for the longest time without any capped-on tape, just with the decoder properly installed. It's totally doable. However, when I upgraded these, I went through the throws to capped-on tape and make sure everything is put together properly. For the last couple years, these ran with a Digitrax in the 161 and an NCE in the 77 for the longest time. When I swapped over to my ESU system, NCE decoders kind of become finicky and don't tend to work with it real well, so I didn't get to run 77 as often as I would like to. So I made the decision to upgrade to TCS decoders in these, just like everything else. And I have been flabbergasted with the amount of difference it made in 77, as well as 161 had a decent amount of runnability change as well. So speed matching these was a pain in the butt before swapping over to TCS. Not that it was difficult to speed match. I have a pretty good process for doing that, but it seemed like the NCE decoder in 77 was constantly coming out of speed match. And so it could be a little bit frustrating from time to time. I did kind of figure out that it was probably from swapping in and out of consistent address. I was doing that for a while with these. And it seems like the NCE decoder has a different speed table in consist. So not totally sure I understand that, but it seems like that was the case. However, when swapped over to TCS decoders, despite this 77 being a dramatically older loco, exactly the same speed table. And it's really quite cool. With the voltage I'm running on my layout, I can set my CVs as respectively 2 for a value of 3, 6 for a value of 60, and 5 for a value of 120. And for the most part, when I have these set up on 126 speed steps, the speed step is the mile per hour almost exactly throughout the entirety of the speed table. So that is a really cool feature. And honestly, I hope that someone comes out with an easy way to do that with all locos. That might be a railside chat in the future here. I have kind of an idea for a product. I'm hoping maybe TCS would do it because they already have all the hardware to put that together. But anyway, after swapping these over, I noticed a massive performance increase in 77. One, downhill, it was holding its speed better. And uphill, it was dramatically more powerful. And so I obviously had to do a pulling power test on these because that's important with these locos, especially for Amtrak locos. It's one thing with freight engines, you can always throw another one on there. But at least in my area, Amtrak is one of the few locomotive companies, or brands, I guess, that runs a single locomotive. For the most part, you don't see freight trains with a single locomotive in my area. Even our switching crews run dual engines. Amtrak is about the only one you'll ever see with a single engine. So having good pulling power is really important with these because 6 or 7 cars on any grade can be quite a slog for one of these engines. This older Kato engine has the best pulling power of any loco in my fleet. So I pulled up my chart here just to make sure that my numbers are correct. The P42 here, the 77, has a percentile of 106%, which compared to most all of my other engines, for the most part, the entirety of my fleet tends to fall in the low 80s. Some get into the upper to high 80s. There are a couple that fall into the 90th percentile. And to be honest, 161 falls right in the center there. It is 82%. So it's pretty much standard with all of my other engines, including most of my Katos. However, 77 at 106%. To put that into perspective, I tested my SD90 Mac, which is one of the heaviest units I have, 135 grams, and it could pull 13 cars up the grade before stalling out. It could easily do 12, and if you let it sit there and spin its wheels long enough, it could get 13 up the grade, which puts it at an 89%, which is some of the higher you'll see. Like, they are serious pullers. 77, excuse me, actually outpulled it completely. It weighs 123 grams and pulled 13 cars up the grade, fully stalling out at 14. It outperforms an SD90, which is a 3-axle locomotive, one of the heavier ones on my layout. And that is just an unbelievable thing to me. So I wish I had more of these to test to see if this particular engine was just an outlier, but there's definitely a difference in the motor between these two. So when I started testing these with the TCS decoders, I always notice when I install TCS decoders that it seems that the motors tend to quiet down a little bit, and 77 was no joke. This unit can go all the way up to about 70 scale miles per hour, and you can barely hear the motor. It is possibly the best running unit that I have ever purchased. This thing is 100% one of my favorite locos just because you can run it fast and it's whisper quiet, which is awesome. Everyone knows who's watched my channel for a long period of time. If you can keep your engines quiet, you're pretty much going to get a good review out of me. However, 161, you get above about about 30 scale speed steps, something to that nature, anywhere from 30 to 35 miles per hour. You start to get some motor whine, and it tends to get a little bit loud. Both of them run perfectly quiet below that. So 161 is a decent, around town type runner, not necessarily a long haul high speed engine. I don't like motor whine, but compared to some of the other ones, it's still relatively quiet. But 77 is absolutely a man amongst men. It is 100% probably the best running engine I have ever purchased. So I don't know if this is one of those, I hear ramblings that certain locomotives made in Japan and that only got sold in Japan ran a little bit better. I don't know about that. Both of these are made in Japan. I bought 77 from a guy in America, so it was a used unit when I bought it. And frankly, I would love to find more of whatever 77 was. If anybody has any information on why this one would be so much better than the one behind it, I'd love to know in the comments, because it really is an outlier amongst all my other engines. And if you could figure out which of these had whatever motor came in 77 that just makes it so much better at pulling, you would be money ahead by trying to pick those up, because it is really, really a nice loco. So with that little bit set aside, both of them are extremely reliable. Kato really has the pickups figured out on these. They just function like a Kato normally does. They don't have problems in turnouts. They generally have pretty decent acceleration and deceleration. They really do, especially once I got my settings dialed in, they really do function like the prototype. Like, you can really make them look like an Amtrak engine taking off. You watch a freight train, start to go. They take a long time to get up to speed. Amtrak engines, when they're leaving the station, are usually really smooth and just steadily accelerate out of there, and you can really get that look using these engines. I planned on doing a little bit of that in my pre-run review. However, I ended up doing the video because I was excited to get started on my new layout, and tore down my layout before I had the feeling to go back and add some of that in. So I apologize. Maybe I'll do a couple of running videos in one of the next couple weeks so people could see that. But I got to tell you, they really do function like the prototype. You can get them to accelerate properly. When it comes to the lights in these, of course, TCS has the best LEDs in the business. They really are bright. I would ask that you go back and check out my Wednesday video about how I do my lights on these. The ditch lights work. They run with the light tubes. That's all pretty standard on Katos. It's basically industry standard at this point. However, the reason why I really like the TCS for lights on these is I can set them up in proper orientations and kind of run the lights semi-automatically. So for me, there's only two configurations that I will run my engines in. So I only ever see dual engines at the front, both running the same direction, so both forward. So the second engine really has no lights running on it. Or you have a one in the front, one in the rear, running opposite directions for kind of a point-to-point system. And the TCS decoders, I laid out the CVs for it, make it really easy for the front engine to have Rule 17 headlights and the rear one to run dim in both directions. It flops as you go forward or reverse. So love that feature. It really makes these fun to operate that way, and so I really recommend TCS decoders for these. They make absolute runners out of them. So the other thing, this is going to be a bit of a short review because there's really nothing I can complain about other than a little bit of a loud motor at 161. The price of these things, and they tend to fluctuate pretty regularly on eBay. A lot of times you can find them in that $80 range, DC, all the way up to $150 with a decoder installed. Again, if you could figure out which version was an older release, you might be money ahead to do it that way. But honestly, you're a pretty good deal anywhere at that $80 range for a DC unit. Again, installing a decoder on these is a little more difficult than standard, but not hard by any means. So I would not be afraid of buying one of these DC. But I would stay away from the $150 ones. That's just a little too pricey for what you get in these units. There are kits as well. 161 came as part of like a starter pack. It came with 3 cars, and it was, I think, $120 when I bought it. So that's really where you're going to find a lot of your value. Kato made several of these kits that had cars pre-installed. If you kind of do some math, figure, $15 a car and then $80 for a locomotive, and look for your kits at that price point, a lot of times you can find those, and that will be a better way to go. So if you are unfamiliar with the P42s, absolutely a good deal. I think you're really going to enjoy them on your layout. And if you're familiar with them, you might try to find one of these older ones, because they really are a game changer. But the reason I wanted to do this review is I recently picked up one of the Kato chargers as well as one of the Bachmann ones. And as good as these units are, that Kato charger probably outperforms, well, I'm not going to say outperforms 77, but definitely outperforms 161. The new frame design is so much easier to get a DCC system installed in, and the new motor is just as quiet as 77. So that is pretty cool. So I'm excited to get some more testing done on it, and what it might mean is a re-release of the P42s with the newer frame that the charger comes with, which might mean an easier install for sound, because sound installs on these can be a bit of a bugger. As well as a little more support for lock sound systems or lock pilots at that point, because the lock pilot may or may not outperform a TCS decoder, but they definitely come in at a lower price point, so that could be a game changer as well. But the frame that might have a built-in area for a speaker, that is a game changer when it comes to these, and might totally change my mind about which version you might want to get. So that being said, thanks for stopping by, everybody. Have a good rest of your weekend. Bye now.